Just that a little. Do. Hello and good afternoon and welcome to the first post-sabbatical live stream. It's kind of nice to be back here with you today as I think through it. Yeah, let's see where we're going to go with things now that this kind of like phase one break is over. It's been really good to take the downtime and to be away from the show for a little while. I'm really bad at taking time off. It was quite an adjustment to just say that I was going to be reading and doing other things for a while. And even then, I wasn't particularly good at it. I've been doing some polls on Twitter and reaching out to see about what should I be doing, like who should I be reaching out to for some of the series that I've been thinking about and planning. But otherwise, yeah, it's been fun. It's been going pretty well. But now that like that kind of rest period is over, I was able to take that time, establish some new routines, get some things in place so that now that we're returning to the... What? That's the same issue that I had last time. Okay. Maybe I'll try a different interface next time. Thanks for the heads up. But what I'm looking at next and now is through this routine, I kind of have a process in place to continue to be able to work through all this material that I have. So that phase two is going to be focusing on reading through a bunch of the permaculture books that I have in place to put together new material for YouTube and elsewhere. And in that, I'm thinking about how the show will be formatted around the series. I've talked before about wanting to do like 4 to 6 episodes on a given topic at any particular time. And the way that that's looking now is what I'm planning and putting together is that the first episode of each season will be an introduction to what's going on. That because these will be released after all of the interviews are already recorded, that I can give a good introduction to what we will be encountering and covering in the weeks ahead. And so once that comes out, then we'll go through a series of interviews that'll probably be edited a bit heavier than they have been, potentially with some breaks for discussion during the middle of the interview if there's something that's said that I'd like to draw more attention to, so that those may be divided up a bit more in lines of perhaps like 99% Invisible or some of those other podcasts, but rather than doing a bunch of different guests each episode, let one guest's voice shine through, because those long format interviews are what I've kind of really dug into over time. And then at the end of that season, to go ahead then and do like a recap episode that is like my traditional opening and ending notes of each episode, to give a like final wrap up that also includes a bunch of resources that were mentioned during all of the different conversations, that I can be doing some additional reading along the way that I can fill in with and share that as well. And so like that's where I'm really thinking about going with the show proper and being able to stick with those long format interviews. I do want to continue to do these live streams. I don't know if I want to do more or less of them. I'm kind of inclined to do more if the schedule allows for it, so that we can do like 2 on the weekends each month, do maybe 2 or 3 during the week, during the month, all at different times, to allow different people the opportunity to tune in, because the audience for the show is global. With that, the other pieces are, I want to do more short videos for YouTube around, basic ideas within permaculture, whether that's, going over the principles in more depth, going over the ethics and having a conversation about like how those have changed and some of like the history and other things that I don't know fit the regular format of the podcast. Similarly, to be able to take those scripts and release them as extended articles then for Patreon supporters. With Patreon, as of tomorrow, we'll be going back to the weekly updates that kind of outline all of these kinds of ideas in more detail. Though I've been using Twitter and Instagram to reach out to people when I'm looking for information, like who to interview and who's available, the different conversations that are going on. Patreon is really going to be the focus for like the lab of this work, to be able to put some polls out around where what kind of information people are looking for, what we can kind of fill in with to really expand on these ideas. I know that I am super focused and have been for a long time on social permaculture. And I still think that there's a really good place for that in like the permaculture podcast repertoire moving forward, because it's what I love. I'm also, landless and an apartment dweller. And when I first went on this sabbatical and the thought of exploring like what it is to practice permaculture in small spaces, that's what I keep coming back to, is what can we do to engage? Because I find that though it's valuable to be growing food, um, even if that's just our herbs and, trying to have some spices, or creating a like lab where we're feeding birds to see what's in the area and doing some studies that way, walking around and doing some foraging in urban environments, that just there's not a lot of space to grow food unless we want to be putting in like growing racks and things that I feel are kind of antithetical to the ideas of permaculture. Um, and it's also that right now, like regenerative ag is a big niche that people are really starting to investigate and talk about more mainstream. And I think that that could be a good way to funnel people to these ideas, to like make the YouTube channel a place to discuss like the permaculture basics and use that to kind of net people into the social permaculture conversations, to point people to the podcast where these long format conversations are going. Just because I look at how much like some basic videos on YouTube can get a much bigger draw than what we see in the podcast arena, that even some of the smallest pieces of um, I'm sorry, even the largest audiences for podcasts tend to pale in comparison to what's happening on YouTube. And just with that reality, being able to try to take advantage of some of these other media outlets moving forward. I'm still interested in doing the live interviews and short documentaries. As I had mentioned before, those are still kind of just in the wings at the moment, as I continue to wait for the vaccine rollout. With where things are currently, I have a few hundred pages of notes that I'm trying to organize between various places and sources, and then to try to pull in quotes and material from the different books that I'm reading. And so as those come together, using those to kind of fuel many of these other short pieces. So yeah, and I widely agree with that, Jason, with about needing to have like more sustainable relationships as well. I just think that there are other people who are doing that work really well that I'd rather point people to. And so that's where like some of these things that are in the back of my head are, 5 books that everyone should read to connect to the more than human world. My favorite non-permaculture books for social activism, um, and some of those kinds of resources to take and expand that bubble of what permaculture is, so that more people can connect to what it means to be part of this like broader movement. Um, to start to find more of those people who are on the edge and like bring them into, yeah, just that fold. And like, yeah, I've also been thinking like about the mutual aid side of things, and what can we do to connect with mutual aid organizations and be of service to those folks who are doing that kind of work. I know that there are great organizers within the permaculture community who are doing things with community gardens. And similarly, I'm getting questions from my wife's coworkers about, how do they engage their local community when it comes to composting and food and many of these other issues. And thinking about like going back out into the community and having these conversations there as well. Um, and seeing what a lot of my colleagues are doing and the way that they're engaging to make their permaculture work more broadly reaching, as that's one of the things that I've never really like sat down and engaged in, like really specifically, has been on like what does it mean to earn a living doing this. And it's one of the pieces that I'm really like I need to work on. I need to get some of these pieces and make them more viable. And so, like from a business perspective, as much as I hate to use that language, like valuing myself and my time, um, not only being able to expand the Patreon community and have more people engaged there, so that we can be having conversations about how to expand these things, and reach more people and focus on what people are interested in, who are not haven't been doing this for a decade or more. Um, do, do, do. Yeah, and yeah, being able to take all of this kind of like diverse background that I have between having studied, park and resource management and environmental education, organizational development, and bring a bunch of those skills to bear within the permaculture community. And I also have to admit that I want to bring more of my politics into this, and that really, ground swell kind of approach to these things of bringing people in and the things that they want to do and that they want to work on, helping to build mutual aid, a sense of community, because of a lot of the focus on permaculture as a land-based practice. I don't know that we've really engaged in what it means to build a global community in a real meaningful sense, to be able to get folks together, to be able to say, this is what I'm working on and this is what I need help with. And I'd like to make some more room for those kinds of things as well. I'd love to develop a permaculture mutual aid fund that people could donate to and use the platform of the show in order to be able to share resources with people, even if that's hey, I've got 10 copies of my books that I want to give away. Can I use the platform of the show to do that? I've got a couple spaces in a class that I'd like to give away, or get people to come attend. That's the availability. Can we raise some money to get to folks who are looking to teach classes and need some scholarship funds and things like that? What are the ways to really kind of like, again, reach into community in that network and bring more folks together to share those resources? After so many years of building this platform, I'd like to put it to better use, beyond just sharing the interviews. Like this piece that I've become really good at and really enjoy doing, I think that there's so much potential to do more with it. And so I'm looking for ways to do that, as well as to bring other people into it who have those skills and are interested in sharing. So I guess I've kind of scattered a little bit there. But yeah, I'm just kind of back and trying to bring all of these pieces that have been so disparate for so long and kind of centralize them within my own personal like data management behind the scenes, get all of this information into places where it is easier to find, better organized and searchable, so that then I can be pulling resources more readily to put into those opening and ending notes, to go through and catalog what books have I decided to keep over the years and why are they in my catalog still. Like I think behind me I've got some environmental science books and some other things that have been really valuable for me over the years, and going through and pulling out the resources from that have been useful for a permaculture perspective. I'm still interested in doing potentially like an ecology for permaculture practitioners, maybe a series of workshops or a series of videos, as so many people have really engaged in the online education space through video and Zoom and things like that. I'm not really feeling super called to use that, like to do that, because of how many people are there right now. But considering what are the ways that I can get my like low tech, high touch approach engaged. to get more of that like science-driven data out there, while also still dealing with the personal side of things and the like storytelling programs. After running that first storytelling for design class, that wasn't quite what um, I just wasn't quite as prepared as I wanted to be for that. I thought I was, but I wasn't. Um, Probably turned that into a series of videos that'll come out on YouTube to talk about storytelling for design. And then, if people want to sit down and talk one-on-one about their design and their projects and how they can do this in their own lives, to offer that as like a one-on-one class, rather than doing like a Zoom program, and just continue to develop and iterate these ideas over the next couple of months, and offer some things and see what happens. I will be launching another storytelling for personal transformation class that's pretty well developed at this point, and so I will probably put some announcements out for folks on Patreon here in the next probably 2 weeks. I usually try to run that course June to June. So the next one of those will be launching here in June, but the course itself will go live for registration here in the next couple of weeks, offering it first to Patreon folks and then through the podcast and the newsletter. Probably not in that order, but the newsletter first, since the podcast will not return to normal production until later this year. Which that return to production right now, I'm looking at September. I may go earlier, but I want to give some time and space to be able to really work out a lot of what the new design for the show will be. Probably start recording the interviews for the first series, which is I'm looking at doing urban permaculture and urban agriculture as that first series, doing a narrow focus on 4 episodes, and then put all that together so that then that will release, as I say, probably start in like the 1st of September with my intro episode, and then just one show a week, over the 5 following weeks. So it covers a 6-week period. And then after that is likely yet to be the self-care series, because I want to look at motion and movement as well as what we can do to take care of our mental health, and just overall well-being from, caring for our whole self and that kind of approach. But yeah, that's kind of where I think everything is right now. And just kind of like, yeah, phase 2 is going to be pulling all these pieces together and getting all of that into like movable parts, and put together like some more solid plans on how all of this will look moving forward. But those are the bones for now, of everything that I'm looking at doing at the moment. I don't know how much more I have for this, but if you have any questions about this or any thoughts, feel free to put that in the chat, and then I can respond to those before we draw this live stream to a close. But yeah, I'll have the next weekly update for Patreon will be out tomorrow afternoon. Likely in a slightly different from usual format. I'm changing some of the headings and standardizing some of the information that will come out each week as kind of an update on what the calendar looks like and things like that, as well as just a general overview of what it is that I've been doing. Some of what we've talked about today will be in that update. There's going to be a poll for Patreon later this week that will be about like, what do you want me to cover when it comes to Patreon questions, and like, what do you want me to be covering on Patreon specific material, because I could be doing some short episodes there. What are the kinds of things you'd like to see in YouTube videos? Having done this for so long, I don't necessarily know what people would be interested in when it comes to their specific permaculture journey. And that's really what I want to drive a lot of the non-podcast material towards, is so that it can be much, much more community focused, so that if somebody has a question about a specific type of design or particular idea in permaculture, that can become, a short video. Because if you have that question, you know, I've always heard the rule of thumb is that for every person who has a question, there's 10 who have wanted to ask it, and there are 100 who want to know the answer. And so, that's what I'd really like to be able to put more material towards. Also, by having that kind of drive, your ideas and helping to put all that together also helps me have something to work towards. I'm really terrible at like sitting down and writing out questions and then actually like answering them in a meaningful way. I really find that if somebody asks me a question, I can probably sit and talk for 5, 10, or 15 minutes unprepared. But like, the duck method of comments in programs. I've got a skeleton. Actually, yeah, these are my two buddies who I sit here who I talk to sometime. Of course, your Funko Pops. These have taken the role of my rubber duck from when I used to do IT and programming and things, but they don't really, say much back. And I just find that I'm not super great at responding to them, even though they are kind of like my stand-in for the audience. And so like having real questions from people makes a big difference in, I find, in my ability to produce for the show and to answer questions, to put together good articles. So that'll be really helpful moving forward. And I'm looking at many, as I say, more of those polls and things like that through Patreon. You'll likely see some on Twitter once we refine some things on Patreon. And yeah, use that to kind of deliver that focus. So yeah, Jason, as you say, with like, not doing primitive skills, even though I've done a lot of that work and enjoyed it, it's by the time I got my skills good enough to do something with it, um, you know, I don't want to have another hustle. And so like all these other things that I'm super interested in, like, we've had conversations about like games and role playing. And I'd still love for us to do some like podcasts together and conversations about like design in the gaming space. I just think about all the things that I'm really into personally, and I don't want to try to monetize something else. There are certain things that I just do for fun, and I'd like to keep it like that. So, what can I do within the permaculture sphere to have a bigger reach and do more of this work that I really love, and be able to keep my focus of where my like earnings and like business still fall into one space while still being available to people whatever their needs are. um you know does it make sense for me to focus more on consultations and meanderings and to be having those conversations with people as well, because the permaculture pit seems to be something that folks are resonating with. I'm getting calls for that kind of work. How to expand upon that. um Yeah, and just continue to make permaculture as a whole a space to work from, but to continue to refine that and to reach out from there. Um, so, yeah, I'll still be here for a while, still be, the voice behind the Permaculture podcast. Depending on how things go, I may go back to work for a while, but I do still plan to make this my primary focus, full-time focus, for at least the next 3 months. um, and get those series together, prepped for release, and then just see where things kind of suss out from there. And I look forward to your feedback and your thoughts as more of this comes out. For those of you who aren't Patreon supporters, I do have some update episodes that I'll be putting together in the next month or so, to kind of do an info dump about this phase 2 of the sabbatical, kind of break down, phase 2, what this looks like, phase 3, which will be when episodes return, as I say, around September, and then this idea of phase 4, which will be just 2022, as all of these ideas come together and are put into practice, and kind of we get to iterate with them and try them some more. So, but for those of you who joined me today, thank you very much for coming in and being a part of this update as I return to the show and all of the work that comes with it. And yeah, I'll share the first Patreon update again tomorrow, and we'll have another one of these live streams here in. I may do one. Probably the first weekend in May will be the next weekend live stream. I may try to sneak one in between during the week. But yeah, definitely that probably either May 1st or 2nd. It depends on whether I'll continue to compete with the sprint runs of the Fifth World or whether I will try to get myself off of that schedule and do something earlier in the day so that folks in Europe can tune in during their weekend afternoon if they would like. So, but yeah, thank you all, and I will catch you again soon.